Okay, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Stephen Gardner. I'm a technical product owner on EBS, and I decided to put on this session because there was a lot of interest on the 444 user group release notes about B2C and external authentication, but we didn't have a lot of time on that call to sort of go through everything. So I've put on this call. So the idea, I want to take you through some of the key features of B2C, why we're doing it. In fact, let me switch to the agenda. And this is what I intend to go through. So to give you an introduction, so for those of you who were on the 444 call, apologies, there's a bit of repeat content, but just to give some background. I'd like to do a bit of demo, but as we've got a longer session today, I'll take a bit more time going into how it's set up, how it's being configured, and some of the reasons behind it. As I go through, I will stop for questions, but I would like this to be interactive. So if you want to interrupt at any point, then feel free to do so. You can unmute your mic. There aren't too many of us on this call, so that's probably the best way. I'll try and keep an idea on the chat, but you're more than welcome to actually just open your mic and interrupt me directly. I'd prefer that, to be honest, because otherwise it feels like I'm speaking to a little bit into a void. And then towards the end, I'll cover some changes that we plan to do in the future and what we think is still left to do and what people might want to do. And then I've got a bit of a Q&A session. So I've got a few pre-prepared questions. But again, if you've got any questions that don't come up during the presentation or that you'd like to ask and want to save them to the end, then we can do that. But as I say, if you want to ask as we go along, or if anything I'm going through isn't clear or you'd like a bit more detail, that'd be absolutely fine. So let's make a start then. So I guess why are we looking to make changes around authentication? So one of the key things, I suppose, is evolving and ongoing approaches to security and basically security and sensitive data. One thing we've always done, we've always stored password hashes in the EBS database. There is a risk that a data breach that could be compromised. I think one of the biggest challenges we've had with EBS authentication, and this is something that we see in support calls and feedback, is that there's a real challenge between making authentication into EBS something that's usable and easy for learners and maybe people who aren't overly familiar with software, but also keeping security as a key point. So I think how do you distribute passwords? How do you manage password resets? How do you manage locking? And I know that managing learner accounts takes up a lot of people's time. And it's something that over the years we've seen lots of tweaks as we've tried to implement better security practices, but do so in such a way that it doesn't make it harder for people who should be able to log in. I think one of the key themes that's come out around authentication over the last 5-6 years, I guess, is multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication, as it used to be called, where you have another device that you use to validate who you are, be that through a phone call, a text message, an email, something like that. And that is more and more becoming a recommendation for any externally facing system. That is something that you are advised to put in place. And this is something we've been able to support in EBS for quite some time now through integration with Google Workspace and Entra ID. You can enable multi-factor authentication for learners and staff who have those kind of accounts. Where we haven't been able to do this is for what I'd call external users. So those users who are associated with your organization but aren't necessarily part of it. The biggest cohort of those is your applicants, people who are thinking or considering coming to your organization but aren't yet part of your organization. But it also extends to cover parents, employers, and any other contacts that you might have that you want to give access to some of your data and some of your systems, but you want to give access in a secure way. So why have we chosen to use B2C as a technology? It's a proven piece of technology that we have adopted in other areas of the business. So different areas of Tribal are already using B2C for this purpose elsewhere. A lot of our software is built on Microsoft technology, and it is a Microsoft solution, which is one of the reasons we've used it. And actually, the technology is exactly the same, well, very similar to Entra ID. So it is a completely separate service. It's separate from your standard AD tenant, but in terms of managing it and what it looks like and how you control it is very similar. In terms of the costings, it is free for basic integration. So Microsoft charge at the moment by monthly active users, and you can have up to 50,000 monthly active users, which we believe will be more than sufficient for most of the use cases. I should just add on that there is a charge if you use multi-factor authentication using phone or SMS. For the email sign-up authentication, there's no charge for that, and there's also no charge if you use like an authentication app. But there is a small charge for other types of multi-factor access, so it's not necessarily entirely free. So just to make that really clear. One of the other key things is, and this is something that we've wanted to introduce into EBS for quite some time now, is the integration with other identity providers. So most people are used to, a lot of young learners, they're all used to being able to sign up with their Apple account, with their Amazon account, with their Google account, and not have to create separate accounts for every service they use. And this is something that I'm sure is a common problem between people on the call today. If you can avoid creating another username and password to remember, it makes it far easier to log in the future and not have it separate credentials to remember. So in terms of who it's for, I sort of covered this already. So the expectation is for organization accounts, and for those, I guess, your staff accounts, your learner accounts, the expectation is that you would use Entra ID, Google Workspace, as you currently can do now. B2C, I see, is very much in use for all other types of accounts, so employers, parents, applicants, and it can even be used for staff who don't necessarily have organisation accounts. So potentially where you've got temporary staff who maybe don't have a college account or a council account, depending on your type of organisation, B2C can be used for that purpose. At the moment, service API type accounts, we will continue to support username and password, something we will look at in the future, but at the moment, we are very much focusing on accounts that are linked to a real tangible person. In terms of adoption and migration, so this is something we're not pushing at the moment. We're not enforcing, so it's very much we want people to adopt it at their own pace when they're ready for it. So the way we've designed the integration is it complements what we've already got. It's an addition. It's something you can look at, you can trial and turn on when you're ready. We haven't announced any D supports at this point, but depending on take up and how this goes, our thinking is that some of the older forms of authentication that now are no longer considered, I suppose, because they don't integrate nicely necessarily with multi-factor authentication. So your LDAP, Windows authentication, and ultimately EBS authentication, we can see down the road that we may phase those out completely. Our intention at the moment is not to develop them further. So where we have issues, I guess, with forgotten passwords, resets, locking, what's in the software today will continue to be supported, but we don't look to extend or improve that functionality. We would put effort into developing integration with B2C. In terms of where you can find further information, communication around this, so there is a dedicated customer communities group. There's a discussion group. There's a lot of things on there. I've put a lot of videos on there, so feel free to take a look at those. We've had the release webinar. This is one of the webinars that we were planning on doing. There's a lot of documentation in the online help, and there's a lot of supporting Microsoft documentation around B2C. So I guess before I go on any further, does anyone have any sort of general questions about why we're making this change, or what the purpose is? I'll take silence that everything is making sense and everyone's happy, but do feel free to shout up at any point if you want to ask a question or interject. So I'm now going to take you through some demo scenarios and some things that I can show you, and I'll take you through, and I'll try and go through in a little bit more detail on what the setup is behind these. Yeah, we'll do a bit. Hopefully, this will become a bit more interactive. What I'll intend to do is go and show in a bit more detail some of the scenarios that I demonstrated. I'm going to try and do everything live, so forgive me if it doesn't quite work. I've got a lot of different accounts which I'm going to try and juggle, but I'll try and explain the scenarios as we go through. So the first thing I wanted to demonstrate was the applicant sign up. So this is probably going to be the biggest and most common use case across our customer base. So the idea is that rather than signing up with an EBS account, we want people to sign up with a B2C account. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to sign up with a Google account. So I'll take you through, I'll do the demo, and then I'll take you through some of the setup behind how I've got that to work. So, okay. So the first thing, so this is our on-track learner page. So this is the login page that you're probably well familiar with. You've got a number of panels on it. You've got your sign in and you've got your sign up. And if you go to sign up, you get a page that looks a bit like this. You can configure this. Someone's just asked, can it be recorded? It should be being recorded. Someone can just check. Yes, we are being recorded. Yeah. So this is our standard registration page, which you can configure. You can put on extra fields if you want to capture. But I think the key things are that you enter a password in this stage, and you've got the password reminder question. Now, the way we've integrated with B2C is that you can change the behavior of the create an account panel. So there's an institution setting, which I will show you, that you can switch to. You can also change on the URL. So if I add this URL here, you can see that the text, that may have been a bit quick, but if I swap between the two, you can see I've deliberately changed the wording here, so you can see that the wording, the title, and the button here can all change based on the URL. And this gives you a way of trialing it before you turn it on and use it for real. So instead of going straight to an EBS page, at this point I'm now at a B2C page. So there is a lot of customization you can do with B2C. What I'm doing and demonstrating here is pretty much the out of the box. So I've configured a logo and I've configured a background image. Everything else is pretty much out of the box as you would see it. One thing I have configured on is 2 social accounts. So I'm going to go through with the Google one. This is probably the easiest one to set up and demonstrate, but the others, social accounts will work in a very similar way. So I'm going to choose to sign in with Google. Now I'm running in a Chrome browser here, and I'm logged into my browser. So this kind of simulates being in an Android browser on an Android phone. A similar thing, you could do an Apple integration with a Safari and an Apple phone. So you get the opportunity to consent, choose my account, sorry, and then you get a consent page. So this is a standard consent, and this explains what bits of information will be shared between Google and B2C. So I select continue at that point. You can see that it's brought through my surname and forename and my email address. And at this point, you get the first stage of the multi-factor authentication. So however you sign up, whether you sign up with a local username or password, or whether you sign up with a federated account like a Google account, you have to verify that you've got access to that email, okay? So I've sent a code, and hopefully, so I'm logged into my Gmail account here. There we go. So I've got a verification code that's come through, and this comes directly from the B2C service and picks up the logo that is defined there. So when I get that here, I can verify that code, and that's now a verified code, and I can continue. So at that point, a B2C account has been created, but then there's one final stage of sign up. So we have a new page here that's very similar to the original registration page, but without the password information. The email address comes through from the third-party provider. first name and surname come through from B2C, but then you can configure and actually, well, on this, we've got title, which is an optional field, but we've made it a requirement that we want people to enter their date of birth as part of their sign up. Excuse me. And then I'm signed up, I'm logged in as my new learner, on-track learner account. So if I flip back to my presentation, okay. So just to go over what I've demonstrated there, we had the live setting for trialing the login going through B2C. We had an email MFA. I showed, so you have the concept in B2C of local accounts or federated accounts. So federated accounts essentially is this third-party social account. So I've used Google as a federated account. And then from a branding perspective, you've got the option for an image and logo, or you can fully customize these screens. So if I carry on. Okay. Right, so we have, so let me take you through the aspects of what's been configured to get that to work, okay? So I mentioned we had a new registration page. So in terms of what that looks like, it's a new designer page. And if I just go to there. So we had a user registration page. We've now got a user registration external page. So it's completely separate. So you can manage it, configure it, and try it out completely separate. But it works and looks very similar to the previous one in that you've got the various fields that you want to configure on. So on mine, I had title, first name, surname, and date of birth, and that's how it's being shipped out of the box. But in the same way that you can configure that for standard registration, you can configure that for registration in B2C. Okay. We showed the try it out, which I covered. I didn't need to enter a new password, so that was a key thing. Because I signed in with my Google account, I didn't need to enter another password to log in. It's all done on the email address. In terms of further setup, so the B2C side of things, so there's a lot of information around setting up the B2C side of things in our online help. So I'll include a link here. The slides and presentations I'll also make available with the recording, so you can follow that. But if I briefly show you from the Azure side. So for those of you who are familiar with Enter ID, this will be very familiar, but this is the Azure portal, and from there you've got a Azure ID B2C section, which is what we're looking at. You have app registrations. So from here, this is my app registration. So we've got one on what we've called our travel college. And from here, you've got your various redirect URLs. So this one registration is linked to both On-Track Learner and On-Track Hub. Within here, you can determine which identity providers you want to make available. So I've configured Google. I've actually turned on the Facebook one, although that isn't set up. But you can see you have a number of other providers out of the box that you can configure. And for each of these, if you search for B2C, so actually, if I do that, B2C, you'll see that Microsoft provides a lot of information on, okay, if I want to link this to an Apple account, what do I have to do? So if I look at that, how do I set up and sign in with Apple ID using B2C? So all the online help, we've not duplicated that. The Microsoft documentation should you give you all that side of things. One key thing as part of the B2C setup is you have various user flows. So again, there are a number of user flows that are available. We have been using the sign up and sign in, and that's pretty much what you will need on both sides of things. We've got one here with with Google, and we're also using one here that doesn't have Google. So for our on-track hub, I'll just briefly show you that one. If I go to the sign up for on-track hub, I haven't got the social providers here. So you can offer different flows, whether for hub or learner hub, if you want to make those the same, or you can make those different. If I look in, in the users, you can see this is the user that I've just created. So I've created a user here. It's been given a sort of GUID type username, and that's because ultimately the user has come from Google in this instance. Okay. Anyone got any questions at this point? Is it all making sense? I will continue if there are no further questions or no questions at this point. Okay. Going back to EBS, what else has been configured? So in reference data, if you've configured Enter ID or Google Workspace, you'll come across this screen, the OIDC issuers screen. So this is my entry for B2C, and the claim is actually on email. So email is the key important thing. Curiously, it's emails rather than email and B2C. What we have done, though, we've extended the EBS. This was in 444. We've extended the properties that it could match on. So prior to this, you could only match on college email for your college accounts. So we've extended this. We've added personal email, and we've also had the option to match on either or personal or college email. Again, they work in the same way. An email address is validated from the external provider, and then we will try and match it with an EBS user. If it matches to one and one only, you successfully log in. If it doesn't match to one, or it matches to two, at that point you would be blocked. So the key bit of information is that email, which has been validated as part of your sign up. Institution settings, there are a number of settings here. So as part of this, we have the URL that can be used that's for Enter ID. For B2C, we have both one for on-track learner hub and one for on-track hub. So you can just about, so the URL is made up of your B2C directory name. And also within here, this is where the flow comes in. So you can see for on-track learner hub, I've got my flow that I showed you in the Azure portal, so the one with Google, and then for on-track hub, I'm just using a standard sign in and sign up one. And in both of these, you have a client ID that links this URL and this client to your app registration in Azure portal. In on-track learner, in the login settings, login page settings, we have one new change here. So to create a panel was a yes or no. So going back to log out. Should this panel be displayed, yes or no? If it is displayed, it's yes. You've now got the option of it. Yes, show the original create account. So out of the box after the upgrade on 444, it was unchanged. But if you want to switch it permanently to B2C authentication, you can choose yes, external authentication here. And then you have, as well as keeping the original, these are the create account settings for what the panel looks like. If you're doing create account, and there's a new set of settings here. What does the panel look like? What will the settings look like if you've applied the B2C external authentication? So we've got the heading and the text and the button text. All of that can be configured and can be different or the same for B2C as it is for your standard create account. So if I flip back to setups of those, are the configuration setups in EBS. I think I've covered everything. On-track learner. Oh yes, and there is just one further one just to call out that there is a setting of whether you allow people to sign up or not. So you can run OnTrack Learner without self sign up if you don't want it there at all, and you don't have to show the create account panel. So that pretty much covers what, with a bit more detail, I showed in the 444 release webinar. What I didn't have a chance to show was what we've also done around OnTrack Hub. So that, if you think that's covered, we've covered the applicant side of things. This, the other side of things is maybe your employer accounts or your parent accounts. So within Central, we have added the ability to, in user management, so actually let me just explain. So this Stella is a contact on an organization. So this is her email address, and she is an organization. She is part of an organization that we're wanting to open up as an employer portal for maybe block bookings or something like that. In a user account, user management, we now have an invite user. So from here, it pops up on a separate screen. On here, you can choose an email template and an email address. Now, you could use these for whatever purpose you want to, but out the box, you'll get a standard B2C invite email template. So I'll just show you that in okay. So this is, I can invite someone to create accounts. So the thinking behind this is that these are institution defined accounts. So I've decided that I've created a user account for Stella and I want her to be able to do block bookings. I'm now going to invite her to sign up and create an account. And now with this one, I'm just going to have to do a bit Blue Peter style. Here's an email I created earlier because our internal, Tribal's internal security doesn't allow me to send external emails. So I've sent an example email to my own account here so you can see what it looks like. So it's an emailer template, but with a link. Now there's a key difference with this link than the previous way we create accounts. So there's no token or anything in this. This is just a standard static link. And I don't know if that you can clearly see that, but there's it goes to the OnTrack Hub URL /home/external hub login. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to go to a different browser. Just paste that in. Okay, so that's the OnTrack Hub login, home external hub login. So if you can imagine, Stella is an employer. You've created an account for her. You've now invited her. Can you create an account? That immediately takes her to a sign up, sign in page. Okay. So I'm going to sign Stella up. See, so I just explain, actually, I didn't really explain on the user demo what this is. To avoid having multiple different user accounts, I'm using a little trick of Google Mail, Gmail. If you add a plus sign, it looks like a different email address to B2C, but actually goes to the same email box. So I can effectively mimic multiple accounts, but only actually need one Gmail account. So very similar to the applicant sign up. Get a verification code. And at this point, so this, I'm going to create this as a local account. So if you remember, for employers and parents contacts, I haven't enabled the Google social identity. So therefore, I'm going to create a standard account. You get some validation about what it should be and what sort of complexity. So again, that is managed in B2C. So she creates an account at this point, and at this point, it should then create an account, match it up based on email address with the account that's being created already in EBS, and she's logged straight in. From a Azure portal point of view, if I look at that, should be able to see that this account's been created. So the newly created account with that email address. Okay. So I've demonstrated the email invitation, the fact that you've already got a stub account, a controlled registration. So it is still a sign up, but it's a controlled sign up in that actually you as an institution are defining who has access and what they have access to. In the same way that you can try this out, you can also try this out on Track Hub. So you can not have it visible or available for standard use, get it set up, make sure you're happy it's working, and then flip the switch to turn it on for real. Any questions at this point? Any comments? Or really quiet? Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning that we've got some further changes planned. I guess just to give you a sort of an insight of what we're hoping to do. So at the moment, the way it is in 444, it's all there, it's all working. The things we are looking at are around configuration. So at the moment, there's going to be a period of transition. So and I will cover one of these points in the sort of the Q&A section. That we expect most people are using EBS authentication for applicants, so there's going to be a period of transition, but at some point we will get to the point where we think, well, actually everyone's using B2C, so we want to start adding sections to basically hide EBS authentication to make it so that actually that isn't an option any longer. So we sort of delayed those because we think it'll be a while before people get through the sort of transition stage. Around parent portals, so the ability to invite a parent, at the moment that still uses the old mechanism. You could configure it because it's literally a standard email, so you don't need to use the self-invite. You could send invitations like I did with the Stellar account, but we're hoping to make that a little bit easier. One thing I didn't show is in the EBS user account. So when I created an account for Stella, actually what I did for this one, I made her an Active Directory. So I didn't have to put in a password. What we intend to do is make a new option in here saying External Authentication. So in that way, you could definitely say this user can only log in with External Authentication. So they, even if EBS login box is available, they wouldn't be able to use it. And we're also going to just add a few improvements around the auditing. So at the moment, when you log on with B2C, it says External Authentication. It's the same as if you're logged in with Enter ID. What we'd like to do is actually record the issuer so you can see, going back to, if I go back to reference data. So if I show the OIDC issuers, we want to make sure that we record which is the issuer. So then you'll be able to distinguish whether someone's logged in with Azure AD or they've logged in with B2C. So you'll be able to see that in the auditing. So I think that's covered all of those. So my intention now was just to go through, we've had a few questions and questions around duplicates and some sort of scenarios that people anticipate. So I'm going to go through those, and then if anyone else has any other questions, I'd love to hear them. So one of the questions we've had is, can we use B2C alongside authentication? How does it work if someone's got EBS credentials and maybe they were an applicant last year but didn't ever become a learner? How does that work? So the thing I kind of wanted to demonstrate, and I'll try and do this with my own account, is that actually all of these things, all of these accounts can sit alongside each other. And it's very much in terms of what options you offer to people to log in. If I log in with my username and password, So that's logging in with EBS authentication, and just so my person code is 72. So if I log out again, and then I'm going to log in as a staff member. So this is logging in with my tribal group account, which simulates logging in with an institution account. You can see that this happily sits alongside. And once again, I'm still logged in, same user, 72. Okay, and then I'm not sure why you would do this, but I would, yeah, I guess it's just to show that B2C can sit alongside this. So if I just remind myself, so I've done a similar thing. Let's hope I've got this right. Gmail.com. So I've created another account, but then with just the plus tribal suffix. So that is me logging in with a B2C account. And again, person code 72. So each of these different ways can complement and sit alongside each other. It's not you have to use one or the other. What you will be able to do is control that from what options you display on your login page, but also you can, as we start to give you options to take those things away. But also if you want to, so in my scenario here, once we are able to enforce external login only, I wouldn't be able to log in with username and password. I would have to use either B2C or a 0AD, i.e. something that's got that sort of multi-factor authentication step in, should we want to implement that. Okay, so this one has been asked as well. Can more than one person sign up with the same email address? So that is I guess it's a key block. So if every email address must be unique. Now, I guess I've shown there is a way around that. If you can use, so I'm using the same email account, but different email addresses. So that kind of works. But the key thing, I suppose, in B2C is that every user has to have a unique email address. And what happens is if you try and use an email address that's already been used, you have to validate that you've got access to it. So I would sign in with an email address. I'd get the verification step. I'd get the email. I'd put the token in to say I've got it. And at that point, it would say, actually, this email address is taken. So you only, that's to stop brute force attacks, essentially. So you've got to validate you've got access to that email, but it wouldn't let you create a new account. Lee's asked a question, would that also follow true if someone was to use multiple social sign-ins? No, I think you're right. So, okay, that's a good question, that. So if I wonder if I can demonstrate that. So I guess if you've got multiple, so if I've got maybe a Facebook account and a Gmail account, both linked to the same email address, what would happen is for each of those, I would get a user in B2C. So they would be seen as two separate users in B2C. But as long as they resolve back to the same email address in EBS, they would log into the same account, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Lee? Great stuff. Right, cool. This one is another question around sign up. So how will OnTrack Learner Hub handle a user signing up with B2C if they already have an EBS account linked to the same email address, but not in B2C? Okay, so this is going to be a scenario, I guess, that you may find yourself in this sort of transition phase. So I think when everyone's logging in with EBS, it's simple. When everyone's logging in with B2C, it's relatively simple. It's that in between where some users have got EBS accounts, some users have got B2C. And the way we've tackled this is on the sign up. So on a sign up with a new user, you would create a B2C account, and that will be successfully authenticated. At that point, we would then see, does that match with a one and a one only EBS user account? If it does, the sign up page will be skipped and that person will be automatically authenticated. So I was going to try and demonstrate this one because it's really quite hard to explain this scenario, but I think is quite an important one, because the way that we'll transition from users who are using EBS authentication to B2C hinges around this. So so I have got, this is where I'm going to get myself confused. I've got too many accounts. So I'm going to log out as me, and I'm going to log in as Esther Gardner. So Esther is an existing student who hasn't got a, she's got an EBS account, okay, at the moment, but doesn't have a B2C account. So she can log in with her EBS credentials, and they are linked to, if we look at her email address, no, that's not what I wanted to see, and she shouldn't have gone to, I've logged into OnTrack Hub. I knew I would do something wrong. Let me do that again, and I'll go into OnTrack Learner Hub. All right, that's better. Okay, and she has got this email account on here. So imagine she signed up last year, she applied, but didn't actually come to college, so never, or maybe she did, and she had a college account, which then went when she left. Coming back in the new year, she is then going to come in, and she doesn't remember that she's got an account, or she can't remember, and she's going to sign up again. So we're going to go with that email address. So it's going to sign up. Should get a code for that. Switch back here. Yeah. So EBS B2C Esther. Okay, so at this point, she's going to create an account. Now, for a brand new applicant, at this point, you would go to the user registration external page to fill in the remaining fields. What I'm hoping will happen is that it will go in, it will skip that page because she's already matched to a user and she's immediately logged in. So we hope that that will make it easy to transition. There's a question on the chat. Would this be the same process for learners that get imported through UCAS but need to log in to Learner Hub for future steps of applications? Okay, so I think the that question will be whether or not they've got a user's record. So in EBS terms, you've got a person record and you've got a user's record. If you haven't got if you've already got a user's record, you get that login scenario like I've just shown you. If you haven't got a user's record, I think signing up, it would create you a brand new one, and then you possibly have to dedupe. It's a good question, actually. I might take that one away and just check that through does work as we'd expect it to work. But yeah, I think the difference will be whether or not they've got a user's account, which actually brings me on to a question around, so I got the question around deduplication. What is the impact of B2C on deduplication? And I guess the answer to that is there's no real impact. So there's no extra information stored against the learner. It's all against the email address. So if Esther came along and signed up for another new account, so she gave a completely different email address, she would get a new account, that would then be separate from the original one because it's a different email address, so it wouldn't be seen as the same. And when you dedupe them together, you would pick the right email address. Okay, can we have a look at that? So I'm just wondering if I can demonstrate. I'm just trying to think, can we demonstrate what might happen for, in fact, I'm gonna go off script. If unless anyone's got any other questions, we could try this sign up scenario now and see what happens. What I'll do is get rid of Esther's user account and see what happens. We can try that. So let me, in terms of cleanup, I will need to, I'm going to take her account out of here. So this is the one she's just signed up with. So I'm going to delete her from there. And then from an EBS perspective, Esther is here. So I'm going to delete her as a user there. Okay. Probably should have signed her out. Check. We're not logged in anywhere else. So we're not logged in here. Right. Okay. So what I think we've got now, we've got a people record without a user account. And she's not a user. Right. Okay. So that simulates coming through potentially from a third-party provider like UCAS, where we've got a people record, but not a user account. So so we've got sign up. And that through. So I think at this point, yeah. So this will create a brand new account. Oh, okay, it goes at that point, right? Okay, the email address you've entered is already registered. Okay. I think that's a good scenario, actually. So it's being blocked because at the moment the record exists in people, but it doesn't exist in B2C. We'll take that away as a scenario and think if we can make that use case slightly better. Could you, in theory, just use B2C and not college logins at all? Yes, yes. If you, in terms of college logins, if you mean EBS accounts, yeah, there's no need to have EBS accounts, but there is still a need to have a user's record, so you can hang roles or anything off. So it's although we're not using the password on the user and on the password on the user's record, we are still using the username, which will get recorded and created by updated by fields. So that you do still need a user's stub record for that to work. Would this stop the need for password reset questions? Yes, absolutely it would. So on the sign up, we haven't done anything with password and sign up and reminder questions, and our intention is that, and we may have actually already done this, that if you're signed in with a B2C account, you wouldn't have an option to see those security counts. There's no need for those password security resets. If you've forgotten your password, then there is, within the B2C, there's a sign up flow. There's a forgotten password flow, sorry. So if I go in here and I've forgotten my password, no, it still thinks let me take another browser because it thinks I'm halfway through that. This is where it gets confusing having different browsers. So if I go back to OnTrack Learner, so within here, if I can't remember my password, I've got the forgot your password here. Same, very similar steps. If I forgot my password, I have to know my and have access to my email address. So at that point, I'd do that. I click a verification code, and then if I verify successfully, I can fit in a username and password. If you don't have access to that email address at that point, that's where you're creating a new account and you have to dedupe again. Okay, that pretty much brings me to the end of everything I wanted to show. We will have a think about that scenario with the people without users account. I think, yeah, at the moment I can't think of a good way of addressing that because we can't link people through. But maybe we could create a stub users record based on a matching people record. That would make that more seamless, I think. But yeah, we just need to make sure we're not going to open up a security hole by doing that. So yeah, thank you for that input. Before we wrap up, any further questions? Anything? Any observations? It's all been very quiet, but thank you everyone who has contributed via the chat. I will put this recording will be put up. I will put the slides up in communities, and if you have further questions, please use the communities groups to feed them back. And yeah, all that you've seen here is available in 444, so it's available for you to try. So if you do have any feedback once you start trying to use it, or any further questions, then yeah, we'd love to hear some feedback on this. As we say, we think it's there and working. There are some niceties that we'd like to tidy up, and potentially some scenarios like the ones we've discussed today that we will improve on. But you know, at the moment, we think this is going to be a good solution, and hopefully will ultimately get to removing that pain of managing user accounts that we know so many of you are having. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today. And we'll leave it there. Thank you.